Okay. So I call the meeting of the Rules Review Committee to order at 5:17 PM. The first item on the agenda is to elect a chairperson for the 2024-2026 term. Are there any nominations for chair? Alder Tierney, or sorry, Alder Killian, Terry Killian, sorry.
I would like to nominate Gary Gisselman.
Alder Gisselman, do you accept?
I would.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay. I'll just ask again, are there any other nominations for chairperson? Okay. So with that, we can pass a unanimous ballot to elect Gary Gisselman, Alder for chair for this committee, excuse me. And I'll turn the meeting over to you, Gary, if you want to come up here.
Oops. You okay?
Yeah, no, are you? Okay. Okay, so your mic is turned off right now.
Thank you, committee. Next item on the agenda is the election of a vice chair. Nominations for vice chair would be in order. There's an,
No, thank you.
Terry?
I would like to nominate Vicki Tierney.
Are you okay with it? Are there further nominations? Are there any further nominations for the office of vice chair? No further nominations, then we declare the nominations closed. A motion to the unanimous ballot for Vicki Tierney as vice chair would be in order.
I make that motion.
There is a motion. Is there a second? There is a second. All in favor said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion is agreed to, and we congratulate Alderperson Tierney for vice chair. Moving then on to discussion and possible action on public comment during committee and common council meetings. You have a variety of the rules in front of you that were part of the packet. I'm not sure, Ann, how did you perceive a certain direction with regard to this discussion or any background?
I did not. Chair Gisselman, maybe Caitlin can help you. I think she worked with Alder Martins, the previous chair, to put together an agenda. I simply reviewed it for sufficiency for the open record law, so I'm not sure exactly what you wanted to review, but Rule 5 talks about public comment, as does Rule 16.
So yes, this item was agendized to discuss public comment for including during common council meetings as well as standing and non-standing committee meetings. You have discussion on that?
Yes.
Yep, and maybe as the past chair of this committee, I can give a little bit of context in this agenda item. And I think in the last year, there's just been a general frustration with the common council in regards to the handling of public comment. Not in a good or a bad way or anything like that, but I think we need to have at the very least a discussion and to try to figure out, are we doing things the best we can when it comes to the comment portion of our committee and our council meetings. And it doesn't necessarily mean changing the rules, but it could mean changing the rules. But we need to have this. I think we need to have this discussion, and make any appropriate changes that do not limit, that do not create any burdens or limits on the public's right to speak. So does that kind of help?
Yes. Rule 5, it goes on to say comments and suggestions from pre-registered citizens and authorized by Rule 16. So right now, the public comment part of the city council with regard to the beginning part of the discussion as well as the end of the agenda, we open it up for public comment as well as as well as for items on the agenda and general comment. So this does not necessarily reflect a committee rule, but at this point in time, it's just a city council rule. So are there, and within the last several months, there's been some discussion with regard to how we should maybe improve this. So I guess we're open up for discussion with regard to are we satisfied with what the rule states now, or do we want to open it up? Or are we satisfied? I guess the question that has come up with during an agendized part of the city council, sometimes the city council would open it up to public comment with regard to a specific item on the agenda. So that's not, do we want to finalize that kind of a rule, or do we want to, let that Rule 5 stand as it is today? General comment, yes.
I am a strong proponent of public comment. And as far as public comment at the onset of the agenda, I believe it's appropriate to allow agenda items as well as items that are not on the agenda. The reason I feel so strongly about that is because I think it's disrespectful to our residents if they want to come and speak to the council and they have to sit for an hour and a half or 2 hours to wait until the council items have been completed and then sit there and wait to comment. I thought of an analogy today, and it was about 10 minutes before I was ready to leave for council, and I thought, what if I was a medical patient? And I called my doctor's office and I said, I don't want to come in for an exam. I don't want to come in for lab work. I don't want to come in for medical tests. I just want to come in and talk to you about some of my concerns. And it was that doctor's policy that he was so busy, he had so many items to address, that he said, I have patients to examine, blood tests to order, exams to order. So if you want to come in and talk to me, you can come in and you can sit in the office and wait until I'm done examining my patients. And I think that patient would either never come in or they would find another doctor. And I think by not allowing public comment on non-agendized items, that's essentially what we're telling our residents. And unfortunately, our residents don't have the ability to go to another governing body to talk to. They just will be dissuaded to not come if they have to sit and wait for an hour and a half to 2 hours. So I believe that we should be allowing agendized items as well as non-agendized items for public comment.
Yes, Vic?
I do agree with Alder Killian about allowing people to do public comment before and after the meeting. What I do think is that if we're going to have a 3-minute rule, we need to stick to that, because I have been in meetings where we have said, okay, your 3 minutes are up. And I've also been in meetings where a person consistently goes on and on and on past that 3 minutes. And I think if we're going to set a rule, that we need to be consistent with our rules, and not in one meeting allow it to be 5 minutes and in another meeting hold them tight to 3 minutes. I just think that we have to have consistency throughout our rules that we're upholding. Thank you.
Yes?
The 3-minute rule is only for council, is that correct? That isn't for committee? Correct. Okay. So I guess that's what I wanted to, I think that should be the same, that we do not have to hold people to 3 minutes to any standing committee or commission.
And I agree, but I think in council, we need to hold to that 3 minutes, because again, I've seen it go past that. I think we all have. So, like I said, for consistency, we need to hold that rule for everybody.
But right now, as I understand the rules, we do not have a rule that specifically speaks to public comment during committee or boards or commissions. So I think that's something that we should strive to also talk about this evening, because that is agendized as such. And I think that would be something. The question that I have come up with is with regard to during, and right now the Roberts Rules of Order allows the city council to allow somebody to speak during general discussion, and that has happened. I think that's Robert's Rules of Order that allows a person to speak during a regular agendized item. Our city council rules does not apply during the discussions of an agendized item, for instance. That is also something that we may want to address more formally as a rule of the city council, so that we specifically, that a person knows, yes or no, that a person could speak to a specific agenda item during the discussion. I don't know how we feel about that, but that has come up lately, and I don't know if that's controversial or not, but that has happened. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, and I think allowing public, during a council meeting, I'm going to preface this during a council meeting, because I think in committee meetings, we're usually the chair of the committee is a little more, has freedom on allowing the comment. But on a council meeting, I don't believe that we should be allowing public comment on individual agenda items during the course of the agenda. We offer a spot at the beginning for public comment, for pre-registered public comment, and I think that's one of the frustrations we're getting, is that not only are we allowing pre-registered public comment at the beginning of the meeting, but also individuals who are not necessarily registered to come up and perform public comment. And just for the expediency of the meeting, and, especially if we are going to consider straying from comment that is off of the agenda, I think we really need to we need to adhere to pre-registered comments, so that if you're gonna come up and you're gonna speak, you're gonna declare your intention to give public comment at the meeting, and then at the conclusion of the meeting, we offer that space for if there's anything else you want to say, you can utilize that space. And we've had quite a few citizens use that space at the end of meetings of the course of my tenure here on the council. So it's people do stick around and leave and give public comment after the meeting too. But I think it's but I just don't feel comfortable with during a council meeting to allow public comment during the actual council agenda.
That has been done, and I think that's a Robert's Rules of Order issue as opposed to a city council rule. We can check on that, how that has happened in the past. Yes.
I agree with Alder Martins. I totally believe in the pre-registered public comment prior to the beginning of the meeting. And I also feel that comment after the meeting is appropriate, because if they stay through the meeting and they hear what happens during the meeting, they may have comment based upon what they've heard. But I don't believe that throughout the course of the meeting, that it's necessarily a good thing, because I think, as Alder Martin said, to keep that meeting flowing, to keep that agenda going, it would be, I think, best practices to limit that public comment to before the meeting and after the meeting, but that's my opinion.
Any further discussion? Yes?
I'm not opposing what either Alder is saying, but I know for me personally, sometimes if I'm sitting listening to a conversation and I'm hearing the feedback from the Alder persons, something relevant may spike in a constituent's head, and they may think it's very relevant in order to contribute to that feedback. So it's just a thought that it allows for better public participation. And I guess if the majority of the committee feels that that's not appropriate, I would go with that. But I did want to pose that thought that sometimes when we're sitting up here communicating about issues, it brings important ideas to our public, and they may want to have something or can add something that might be relevant and important to our decision-making.
Because I think the mayor, as well as the city council in the past, has allowed that to happen. Do you feel comfortable in it so that the people exactly know? Is it up to the mayor, up to a majority of the city council, or would you we are the rules committee, so we can alter with regard to how we see the rules with regard to the city council meetings. Unless you just leave it as such, and as in the past, the mayor has made that decision one way or the other. We can continue with that tradition. Yes?
What you're saying is that the mayor who is chairing that meeting will just decide if he wants to allow, he or she, whoever it is in the future, want to allow that person to speak. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
I'm okay with the chairperson making that decision.
Any,
Would,
Mike, yes.
would this be, when we have things like this that kind of deviate from our standards, if the chair was to allow public comment out of order, I guess this is a parliamentarian question, is this something then the body would have to agree to by consensus, or could it automatically happen at the discretion of the chair? And maybe Ann Jacobson could answer that question.
I think that would be up to the council if anybody objected to the decision of the chair. Then I think it would be up to the majority of the council to permit somebody to speak out of turn according to the council rules as they're written. Yes.
Okay.
so the agenda item is with regard to the possible action on public comment during committee and common council meetings. So far, we've just talked about the common council with regard to, right now, there are no rules that I could see with regard to committee action. Is pretty much up to the chair of the committee with regard to public comment, either before, during, or after the committee meetings. Any comments with regard to that? I think that, I personally feel that one person speaking to the Finance Committee one day on a specific issue, and that chair allows you to speak, but then on the next night, Economic Development, you're at a same committee committee of the City Council, and that chair does not let you speak. So, I see some, but I'm just looking for opinion with regard to committee public comment. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am never going to support a resolution that restricts or inhibits more public comment. And our city attorney was kind enough today to spend some time explaining to me that the rules of the council do not always apply to the standing committees. And I would really like to see, since you brought up the difference in what chair people allow, I would really like to see the standing committees all agendize public comment. And it can be for specific items on the agenda, because the committees are speaking to specific items. They are not talking about the vast number of items that the council deals with. And if they agendize public comment based on what's on the agenda, I think that would be very appropriate. Thank you.
Are you suggesting that as a possible rule?
I am.
I'm not, so would this be just sort of a parliamentary issue with moving forward? That would be in the light of a motion to create such a rule. I would trust that that would be the way to proceed with this.
Yes, it would be an amendment to the ordinance to add that rule into the ordinances, which then would require a 2/3 approval vote by the council.
Right.
But all items from this committee, go to the committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole
first
on a majority vote.
Before they would go to council.
Yep.
So I think a motion would be in order with regard to that, the wording that you wish with regard to a rule.
Okay, I'd like to move that on standing committee's agenda, public comment be allowed based on the agenda items.
Sort of the first, or maybe the first item on the agenda most likely is how that would look like, what that would look like. Is there a second to that motion?
My question is, would that public comment be before the meeting or at any point in the meeting?
It would have to be agendized as a specific number one,
Okay.
depending on where you would want it with regard to the beginning of the minute of the meeting, either before or after the minutes, for instance.
Okay.
Public comment, then minutes.
Okay.
Call the meeting to order, public comment, minutes of the prior committee, and then moving on to the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
That's how I would perceive that public comment during committee meetings.
Okay, I would second it that.
So there is a motion and there is a second to have that wording. Do you have that?
The language to amend the ordinance of the standing rules of the common council.
Right,
To include public comment on every standing committee agenda.
right. A question, Becky.
Well, I mean, so this would just be standing committees. Boards, commissions would not have that. Is that your intention?
That's what I'm hearing. That is the motion. So boards, other boards and commissions at this point with this motion would not have that. Unless the person making the motion would want to include commissions as well as boards.
I guess whatever the board feels, whatever the committee feels is appropriate. I know I'm on Bike and Peds, and they have public comment every meeting. I don't see any reason to not have public comment.
So your motion would, a friendly amendment would be to add boards and commissions.
Yes.
Was the second agreeable to that?
I think for standing committees, it's good. I think that some of these other meetings are pretty informal, and for the most part, they have discussions on things. So I guess I don't feel that it's necessary, but for standing committees, I would like to see it.
That's fine with me, as long as, yeah, that works.
So the motion would specifically refer
For
then to
standing
standing
committees,
committees
yeah.
of the city council?
Yep.
Okay. Any further comments or questions with regard to the motion in front of us? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is agreed to. Thank you. So the discussion, possible action, and public comment during committee and common council. So is there any other issues or thoughts with regard to that agenda item? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the discussion, possible action amending Rule 5, Order of Business of the Common Council. I'm not sure what that agenda item was.
Chair?
Yes, Mike.
I guess, for context, when we were drafting the agenda, I added this one to the agenda, mostly because if we were going to have potential action on item number 4, it may require action on Rule 5. So that was left in there. And so that was so I had that in there as a, something that potentially we might need to do. But I do have something I'd like to say on Rule 5 in the order of business. And as I was stating before, one of the frustrations I've noticed in the Common Council meetings is the lack of decorum that is happening in the council chambers, especially if we have a contentious item or issue that is on the agenda. And I really enjoy the amount of people that are coming out and are part of the discourse and are engaging with their civic leaders. That's great to see. But I think one of the challenges I'm seeing is sometimes it's thing, if you're not familiar with how meetings are run, we end up in a situation where you get stuff happening in the council chambers that really shouldn't be happening. And I would like to see something added to our order of business, some kind of a statement that's made at the beginning of the meeting, similar to what the Wausau School Board does, in just letting everybody know that is in attendance on how the meetings are going to, how the meetings are run, what the expectations are in giving public comment and other items that are happening inside the chambers during the meetings. And I think that if we make this statement at each and every meeting, it'll become commonplace and help diffuse those situations where we have contention happening, with certain issues that come before us.
Did you want to make that sort of a statement by the mayor or the chair which would lead to a general description of what's happening, for instance, that night, but I would think that would be a hard rule to write with regard to decorum.
I think, it's, Alder Lucan shared with me, what the school district is using, and they say something, and this is something that we'll probably have to, I don't think we're going to have action tonight on this. It'll probably have to go back to staff and just to kind of work it out for what we need. But the board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. Please identify yourself by name and state your address. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration. The timing system will identify time remaining for the speaker on the screen. Speakers shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. Public comments may not identify specific personnel or students by name or through the use of the sufficiently detailed description so as to identify the individual staff or student. The presiding officer values civil discourse and may interrupt, terminate, or prohibit public comments that do not adhere to these rules. And this is what the school district uses, and I think that a similar statement can be adapted for the Common Council.
Yes, Alderperson Rasmussen.
Thank you. It's weird to be on this side of the microphone, I have to tell you. So when this discussion originally came up around scheduling this meeting, one of the concerns that a number of our council members had brought to me was that what we're seeing a lot of times with a volume of public comment is a total lack of respect and a total lack of decorum. There's personal attacks, there's wild emotions that are playing out. That's the kind of things, when you watch meetings of other units of government, their meetings, when you watch them on YouTube, don't look like our meetings. And people shouldn't be able to watch our meetings for entertainment or sport. And, I think there's just been such a level of emotion and aggression that's been playing out. People can come and tell us what they need to tell us and make their point without personal attacks and without a volume of disrespect. And it is really up to whomever is chairing that meeting, whether it's council or a committee, to really maintain control and remind those people when they start to spiral to that level that that's just not what we do here. And so I think a lot of it, the control of it is going to really happen in real time for whoever really is in charge of whatever that meeting of the day happens to be. But there's been complaints about that. I think maybe reading a statement at the beginning to remind people of, how you approach a unit of government and the proper way to do that. And, maybe that a statement at the beginning would be helpful. Another thing that I've heard from council members on is the display and waving of signage in this chamber. Other units of government are not allowing that. And we've had that happen from folks of all political stripes. 3 years ago, when we had an emotional argument about Community for All, that group brought signs. Since then, this term, others have brought signs. They don't need signs to communicate with us. Come and tell us, if you're the public, come tell us what you have to say. Bring yourself and bring your ideas. But, I think that we maybe need to, in our rules of decorum, set forth that those signs need to either stay in the lobby or stay in the vehicle, but they shouldn't be in here waving around in the audience. They're distracting, and, sometimes they're antagonistic, depending on who's all here. So, those are the requests that I've received from our peers. Both a reminder to people about what decorum is, then a reminder to all of us who chair meetings to hold people to that standard. And then second, we need to maybe create some policy about signage and the display of signage, regardless of what it says. I think people can make their point in person without a sign. So that's just what I've been hearing. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there has been personal attacks made, not just on council members, but on city clerk during these meetings, and I just don't feel that should be allowed at all. I just don't feel that personal attacks should be allowed. Again, a person can come up here, as Lisa had said, they can express how they're feeling about an agenda item, but personal attacks just should not and cannot be allowed. Otherwise, we lose respect, we lose control, and this is supposed to be a government process, not a free-for-all. Thank you.
Alderperson Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I've heard from a lot of my colleagues as well is the mayor's comment at the beginning of the meetings. I don't know that it's appropriate. I think a lot of my colleagues think it's not appropriate. And if it's continued to, I mean, we've all seen it, from standing out here disparaging us to reading poems off a newspaper. I don't think it's appropriate. I think if it's allowed to go on, I think if the mayor is going to make a comment at the beginning of the meeting, then maybe also our council chair should be allowed to, our council president should be allowed to. Thank you.
There's a couple of different issues raised. I'll come back to that. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Alder Tierney and Alder Rasmussen, because I have been at many, many school board meetings, and also in teaching. We have partnered many times with with WIPS and Eric Giordano in teaching the skill of deliberation. And so that is what happens here. And I would fully agree that I don't know of anyone who would not welcome public comment, but I think that it would be irresponsible for us not to uphold decorum, and that, having a hostile atmosphere, I don't think, I think our duty is to help to keep that from happening. So I'm all for public comment, contrary to some things that have been put out in the media again, which I don't appreciate. But anyway, I would very much appreciate if we could have something that lays out, the rules of decorum at each meeting. It works really well for the school district, and I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So we'll put together the wording that is coming out of this committee with regard to that wording, not necessarily a rule, but as a template for chairs and of committees to read and to advise what, as sort of a beginning part of the meeting. And we'll have that, the clerk will put together that, those wordings from this meeting. Thank you. But Alderperson Larson brought up the presentation part, because that is part of the rule. There is a presentation rule as part of the city council. Rule 5, number 3, presentations are agendized. Just as long as they are agendized, that does give the mayor, and I assume that is also appropriate to city council members if it's agendized with regard to presentations at the beginning part of the city council meeting. I assume that so if it's agendized as such, mayor's presentation on such and such, or alderperson's presentation on such and such, that is, according to our rules, I sense that is a legitimate way of making a presentation, not only to the city council, but also to the public reaction, because I think Alderperson Larson's issue with regard to that, I don't know if it needs to be maybe finalized or cleared up or made more clear what is a presentation, but I think that is how I see it. But Alderperson Rasmussen.
Thank you. I think a presentation is different. Like when we receive a presentation from a community organization or whatever, we put their presentation on the agenda and we plan for that, including whatever audiovisual needs they may have or whatever. I think what people are talking about, or at least what they've talked to me about, four members have talked to me about, is a new segment that's appeared on the agenda that is a specific mayor's remarks that's appeared at the beginning of the agenda this term. And my understanding is that the deputy city clerk has been directed to have that as a standing item on our agenda. And, the request that was made of me is that that's the council agenda, it's our agenda. And the council should control, even though the mayor signs the agenda, according to the city attorney, the council retains control of that agenda. And so for that item to have been added to, as a standing item, that's new. And so that's different than a presentation that we would receive as a group that's educational or informative. And so that little statement at the beginning, which at our last meeting included the reading from the newsletter that Alderman Larson referenced, that little segment there, I believe is new to our agenda, that we've not had that in the past as a standing and recurring item. So I think that's what he meant. And 3 other members have made the same comments to me over the last couple of months, that item has somehow appeared. And we didn't add it. So as part of this meeting, not to remove presentations, but to remove that specific item at the top of the agenda was what they were seeking.
So maybe to clearly identify what we mean,
Well, to clarify how it appeared
Clarify.
and who approved it, because it wasn't us.
well, clarify what a presentation,
Correct.
to clearly identify what number 3 presentations mean with regard to presentations.
Right. And there shouldn't be a standing item added to our order of business unless we've approved the addition
correct.
of that item, and this thing seems to have sprung up. And that's where it had caught people's attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. I think, we're looking at 2 different items here. Number 3, presentations, which is totally understandable. But to Alder Larson's point, I think he was bringing up item number 6 in the order of business, communications and recommendations from the mayor. Now, it is in our council rules, and previous mayors have not really or seldom utilized that item in our rules, and we see it used a lot more. And I guess, if we're going to do anything to change that, or even to eliminate it, I think we need a little bit of information on how that item has become part of our order of business. Maybe a look back or something to figure out, the intent of when our order of business was drafted, why that item was put in there, and what was the original intent, and either we get back to the original intent, or we keep doing what we're doing, or we change it somehow.
So then to try to go back into the original, when this did come into the rules, that specific number 6, when that did come into the rules of the city council, exactly when that did come in.
And maybe we don't, and maybe it's so far back in history, maybe we don't know. Maybe it's always been there and nobody's used it. And, but I guess.
We can try to find that out.
Yeah, but in absence of that, then we have to decide, well, if that's something we want to do.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, just, I have no problem with having that placeholder, if you will, in the order. What I have a problem with is not explaining on a case-by-case basis what those communications might be about. We're not giving council, staff, media, citizens, anybody a forewarning about what will be discussed by the mayor in this placeholder agenda item. I don't think that's right. People might want to show up if they're interested in whatever that was going to be, and there should be documentation included in the packet too to support it. It shouldn't just be like a mystery box. Thank you.
yes, Alderperson Killian.
I agree with Alder Neal. I think that that communications and recommendations placeholder is very appropriate. And and I also feel like the mayor, who has been elected to be the head of our city and provide some leadership, if he has some information or educational material that he would like to present to the council, I think it's very appropriate. If as a whole, they would like to see what that information and so that communication will be regarding, I think that is appropriate as well. But I think it's very appropriate that if our mayor has something to offer to the council and to the residents of the city, that be left there, and that is an appropriate thing. Thank you.
Yes?
I don't know what Robert's rules are on allowing a chair to have a presentation at the beginning of a meeting, but I also believe that if it's on the agenda as a placeholder, then yes, it should be allowed. As long as it's on the agenda, and as well with, I guess if somebody else wants to make a presentation, if it's on the agenda, that it should be allowed. I think for anybody speaking, whether it be the chair or other council members, we have to expect the same decorum from each other as we expect from people in the audience or from our citizens. We need to not be calling out people, not be in a negative way. We have to expect the same decorum from the chair right down to each alderperson, right down to each citizen that presents. But I, too, don't have a problem with the mayor making a statement as long as it is on the agenda, unless, as Alder Killian said, if there is something that is educational, such as a Roberts rule, or that may have been in question. But again, otherwise, I don't have an issue as long as it's agendized. Thank you.
Alderperson Wilkins.
I'll make this quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would, like Alder Neal said, it would be helpful if if it's agendized, if there's a notice, as to what it's about, or something included in the packet so that we could know. I think that, to give public notice and for us to have notice would be respectful. Thank you.
Yes, Alderperson Killian.
The conversations are kind of raising a question for me. Are we going to require that chairpersons of standing committees, if they want to make a comment about something, have to agendize what their comment? I mean, I attend committees and the chairperson regularly expounds about their feelings about something. Is this going to be a standing rule for everybody? And something else I'm thinking about with decorum is everybody wants our council meetings to have decorum. And I think I have heard our mayor at the last two meetings I've attended remind people that they're only to address comments to the mayor and they're not to degrade anybody. So I think that's being followed. Regarding the signs that Alder Rasmussen brought up, I agree. If somebody has a sign in the chambers and they're waving it and they're disrupting the meeting, but I think we're going to have to start taking a look at some amendment rights, because I don't know if saying somebody can't bring a sign into our council chamber is something we can do. I don't know that. So I think we're going to have to find out the legality of what, how far we can go as far as those restrictions. but I agree decorum is important. I have heard our mayor emphasize decorum in our meetings, and there's another issue that I was thinking about as far as decorum, is when the people in our chamber clap, some of the members on the council feel that that's not proper decorum, but I want you to remember that oftentimes the city council members will stand up and clap about something. Are we going to allow that, or is that just a different kind of issue? So I guess I just want you to clarify your feelings for me. Thank you.
May I?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. There's a difference. When I said that, it was not in celebration. There has been clapping in here in hostility and finger pointing at council members and clapping in terms of after someone makes a public comment. Watch other government meetings, please do that, because that is not decorum. So, I mean, I will stand by that always. I teach every day. We are tasked with teaching students respect. What has been happening is not respect. And so I don't think that it's appropriate for these chambers to be a free-for-all. And I mean, I've thought about asking, otherwise, could we have a training on what that is by someone like Whips who does that? Because this is not it. So when I said about clapping, what I meant is the clapping in hostility and pointing fingers, never a clapping to celebrate. So I feel very strongly about that.
Alder Lukens, let me just ask you a question. I mean, we've got some fine lines here, it feels like. So will the chairperson or will the mayor be then obligated to say no clapping at all? Or, I mean, it feels like we need to have a rule, because it's difficult to tell someone you're clapping in hostility versus happiness about what's happened. I don't know how to distinguish that and not run into trouble.
So it's not even about the clapping, it's if the chair will maintain decorum. That's what hasn't happened consistently. And so fine, it should be up to the chair, but this should not be happening repeatedly. And the chair has not always done that, so I will disagree with that. That hasn't been done consistently. And I would like for us all, and for everyone in the chambers, to feel safe. I have heard from people who have been here at some of those meetings who wanted to make public comment because maybe they had an opposing viewpoint, but they did not feel safe. And I don't think that's okay, because it should be open to all of our citizens.
Oh, I would agree with you. Yep.
The sense of decorum has to be brought into the chamber by the chair of the committee. That is the duty. I believe that's we can write as many words as we can, but the decorum has to be set by the chair of the committee with regard to how that person's expectations of the audience and how people behave. That has to set that standard. Yes, Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me the time to speak. I'm going to have to speak and go home. One other thing is, if you're going to allow the mayor to have his talk to the council or whatever prior to the meeting, the only thing I would ask is, like what Alder Neal would suggested, is to put the content in the packet so that all council members are aware of it, what's going on, and not taken by surprise. And if this is going to happen, then I would also ask that the council members be allowed to speak also on what the mayor just addressed the council on. I don't feel it's appropriate for him to get up there and have a little speech and not allow us to comment on it. And thank you for your time, and thank you for all the hard work that's ahead of you. Thank you. And good night.
Good night. Yes, Vic?
I guess my thought on that is those packets are supposed to be out 6 days prior to the meeting. If a packet comes out and somebody sees the content that the mayor will be speaking about, and they feel they are going to have a response to that, then they should notify the city clerk and be added to the packet.
To the agenda.
Right, and not respond or have their comment as a knee-jerk reaction to what the mayor may have said. So if the mayor puts on there that he is going to have a comment about the funding of something or what have you, then if a council member thinks that they are going to have views on that, they should contact Caitlin and be added on to that agenda too. I don't think having people just stand up or request to speak afterwards is the best way to handle that.
It would have to, there would have to be an additional wording to the rules with regard to that, because right now it's communications and recommendations from the mayor, reports of city officers, committee reports, standing and non-standing, and then unfinished business. I think there would have to be a separate line item for that.
Yeah, and I was addressing Alder Larson's comment that a presentation be allowed by council members. I'm just saying if we're asking the mayor, the chair, to put it on the agenda. So if somebody feels that they're going to have a response, that too should be on the agenda. Fair is fair, both ways around, but that's my feeling.
But I would think that we don't want a continual debate with regard to between two alderpersons with regard to what's going on. I think that's why we have, if there's issues in front of the city, I think those issues there's appropriate places in committees that's where that belongs, and that should be discussed. You can certainly forward issues to any standing committee on the spot. And I think that's, instead of engaging in a dialogue, I think that it quickly can be set to, I think an alderperson and/or can make a suggestion that it can be forwarded. I mean, if it's that of a larger of an issue, then that can be dealt with appropriately at a committee level, and they can deal with that and bring it back to the city council as they choose.
Okay, thank you.
That's how I would see that. But so to avoid the continual, yes, Mike.
Yeah, I think with doing that, allowing a council response to the communications and recommendations from the mayor, I think we're opening up a big can of worms, especially if the responses, if the content of the mayor's communication needs to be in the packet, and then the responses need to be in the packet. This is like, what kind of a mess are we creating here? I think that's part of my thought process on we need to go back on what the original intent of this item 6 is, communications and recommendations of the mayor. And, I can see that, I can see how it would be beneficial to the mayor as the presiding officer of the meeting to be able to say, I want to challenge the committee, X standing committee to move forward with such and such an item, and then let that drop down into the committee level and have discourse go from there. But that's part of the reason why I think, are we sticking to the intent of what this is? Or is it something that or are we doing something that we're not really, not,
So-
had intended to do?
So are you questioning basically the whole issue of number 6? That's what are you questioning,
I think it's good to be in there, communications and recommendations from the mayor. I would like to know what the subject matter is going to be prior to a meeting. I don't think we need to have the entire discourse in the packet, but at least agendized so that, so that there's forethought into the process. Like, this is what is going to be spoken about, and it doesn't, that this is the message I'm going to deliver, and it doesn't stray from that message. But I don't believe we need a response, because if there's going to be because if it's something that's worthy of a response, then it needs to, and then that item needs to filter down to committee, and then the committee can take it up.
yes, Alderperson McElhaney?
Well, I think that we're missing the point that if it's on the agenda, it needs to be specific as for an open meetings laws, period. I don't think it's what we want, what we should like, or what should be said. But we have been taught that agenda items have to be specific so the residents or the public at large understands what is going to be discussed. Communications and recommendations from the mayor is not accurate. It cannot stand as that because it's not allowing the public to understand what is going to be talked to, be it whatever it is. All of our agenda items have to be specific. I mean, we've gone through this a number of times where things have been pulled off the agenda right before a meeting because somebody objected that the language was not specific enough, that the public would not be able to understand what was going to be discussed and then go from there. So that's my point. Instead of, well, the mayor should be able to or whatever, I don't think it flies with open meetings laws as this without any indication of what he's going to discuss in an open meeting.
I think, yes,
Based on what Alder Martins and Alder McElhaney said, I agree. I think this placeholder should be left there, but as Alder Neal said, it could be specific with agenda, what is going to be communicated. And I do not believe that we should have the opportunity to batter back and forth as Alder people. I agree that needs to go down to committee level. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Yes.
I too agree with what the other alders have said regarding the response and having the comments detailed agenda on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Denny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good discussion so far. So I've been attending these meetings, council meetings, from about 2012, pretty regularly since 2014, really. I was here when Linda Lawrence had multiple direct attacks. It was brutal. There were attacks on Mayor Milky. There have been attacks on the finance director. There was a city employee who dressed down the city attorney. It was really, really ugly. So, my goal is to reduce that, but let's not pretend that it just happened. A lot of this comes out of the October 8th meeting, and if you haven't gone back and review it, I've looked at it a few times because I was concerned about a lot that was said since then about Robert's Rules violations. There were a lot of them. There were members of the audience telling me to sit down, telling me to resign. Now, you made some good points as far as what is the chair's obligation to set the tone for the meeting versus what is the chair's what is the chair's right to have individual commentary. So I think, the intent, as Mike says, so out of that October 8th meeting, I set out to learn what other cities were doing. I gave you a little homework assignment. I asked you to take a look at how other cities do this. You can look at Green Bay. The mayor makes announcements from the chair. Sheboygan, the mayor makes announcements from the podium. Stevens Point makes announcements from the chair. Mayors make announcements. Now, what was the original intent? Is it announcing promotions, retirements, new hires, administrative type things? The city of Sheboygan also has a slogan that the clerk reads. There's different, Green Bay has an invocation where somebody leads a prayer. There are different things that happen at that point in the meeting. So it's not, this isn't unique to Wausau. So maybe communications and recommendations could be limited to more benign items of interest to the city. If I had a significant policy issue, I would bring it here. For example, when Mayor Rosenberg did the strategic plan, she stepped down from the chair and she made the presentation from the podium. That's a policy presentation. I think that should be handled differently, and it should be more specific on the agenda, and I would agree with that. So communications from the mayor, I think are just set. They're listed in the council order of the meeting, so that's where I got that from. This all stems from looking at what went wrong and how could I go back and fix it. I could have, when I was setting up that meeting on the 8th, the agenda item was changed, if you recall, about 25 hours in advance. So the night before, the agenda item was changed. I felt it was important so that people knew, and as it turned out, most people did not know that the agenda item was not what we were talking about. So as a chair, that was my obligation to make that clear. We had alders trying to shout me down. One of my mistakes is I should have either given that presentation from the podium or from the chair, but I was walking around up front. Potentially, that's a problem. I was not looking to be, I think somebody filed a complaint that I was speaking out of turn. Well, then if you count the number of times people have spoken out of turn here, we'd all be in jail. So let's just try to remember what the rules are for. The rules are to guide us into the most effective and efficient meetings. And that's all we're trying to do here. The rules seem to be turned into a weaponization, and that's not what they're for. It's for creating efficient decision-making. And anyway, back to stay on your point, Mr. Chair, the communications really, it's been an evolving thing because when I discovered it was there, I decided to use it in a manner that other cities are using it. So let's keep that in perspective. Thank you.
Well, the rules are so that the citizens of the city of Wausau can clearly understand the operation and function of the city council. And we're here to, and this committee is here to make sure that that is right and with the interest, the ultimate interest of the citizens of the city of Wausau with regard to how the city council operates with all good intention to do the best thing we can, and that includes open meetings, decorum, letting people know exactly what the agenda is about, so that when they see the agenda, they know that, hey, I should come and speak to this issue or not. I think we're trying to make sure that this is clearly, that agendas and the order of the business is clearly identified with all great decorum, of course, but I think that that's what we're trying to do here with regard to these rules and this committee. Vicki?
You know, as I
Vicky.
look at this and listen to this, yes, I think if the mayor is going to be presenting something of significance, that it's related to council functioning or something that's related to public, it would be great to have that on the agenda. But if indeed the mayor wants to read a poem that he thinks is inspirational, I don't feel like that kind of extemporaneous thing needs to be on the agenda. And that can be a very positive and uplifting thing. And I think we have to be careful about getting too about all of this. We need to allow some flexibility for the chairs of our committee. And yes, if there's going to be something that's going to be significant for the public, put it on the agenda and say the mayor's going to be presenting this, and if you're interested, you know I'm going to be presenting this and commenting on it. But if the mayor wants to read a poem or provide some inspirational message to the council and to the public, does he really need to put that on the agenda? I think that's excessive.
Becky? No. Well, but I personally think that the citizens need to know that whatever he's going to be speaking about has to be agendized so that they clearly understand what the mayor or any city council or any agenda item is clearly about. Reading Washington's farewell address to the city council in the city of Wausau is great, but then that should be what is going to be talked about.
That's quite lengthy. I'm talking about a 30-second poem,
I know
Mr.
that-
Chair.
I know it's quite lengthy, but that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I'm looking at some of these rules, and I look under Rule 7, presiding officer and chairperson, on D, it does say the mayor may speak on any question or make any motion if he vacates the chair and designates the council president to preside temporarily. So, maybe that's the issue, is that if the mayor wants to speak on a question or make a motion, that he would need to do that from the podium, because that's what's in our rules. And then Alder Rasmussen, who's the council president, would, chair
Would take
while
the
he's
chair,
doing
yes.
that. So it does address that in Rule 7 to some extent. That's it.
Mike?
Yep.
With regard to number 6, communication, so the thought was to more clearly identify the wording of that item to make sure that that is clearly identified as agendized items and specific issues that are being brought to the floor by the mayor. Is that how you?
It's, exactly, and it doesn't have to be a lengthy, we don't need the full content in the packet, but just on the agenda, this is what's going to be spoken on. This is a communication from the mayor. Well, we want to know, we want agendized what that communication will be, even if it is the poem, to Alder Killian's point, the poem. And I'm going to speak on this because this is something I've really felt that I thought that, having a city poet laureate is a great idea, but I felt like it would have been better, that poem would have been better honored if she came in and presented it to the council. But that's going off of what we're speaking of today. So, but yeah, and maybe that's, I don't know if we need a motion today or if we need to go back to staff, to kind of, hammer out that detail if this is truly necessary for open meetings, if the mayor's going to deliver a communication, we need to know what the communication is or is not, or what the original intent of that item is in our rule, order of business.
So we'll come back. I think we can talk about that as the next agenda, at the next meeting of this committee with regard to that, some final wording with regard to that.
Yeah.
And with that, I would like our parliamentarian to also opine as to open meetings laws, considering as the general thing of saying, I don't even know what it says about that. But I would like that opinion as well, if that we are, if we keep something general and it is not clearly stated in the agenda, if that is an open meeting law violation, that we have not let the public know exactly what's being discussed or planned to be discussed, even said.
So even a discussion with regard to exactly what the state open meetings laws reflect.
Right, because I know we've had these discussions many terms. As long as I've been here, we've had discussions about how agenda items are stated. We have had previous council people object at the time that specific agenda items were not clearly stated, that the public would not clearly know what was going to be discussed. Those items have been pulled. So when I see something that says communications and recommendations from the mayor, I don't see that as being clearly indicating what is going to be discussed, because is it a communication or is it going to be a discussion? I mean, there have been times when he has said something and there was discussion afterwards with council members. I don't remember specifically what it was, but there was. That was not on the agenda. So that is I would like an opinion from the parliamentarian. If something as general as this and we're letting it go, if that is, are we in danger of open meetings violations?
Yes.
Point to Alder McElhaney's discussion. I believe our parliamentarian reviews all of the agendas, doesn't she? To make sure that they're appropriate. So haven't all of these agendas been reviewed by our city attorney, and they must be okay if she's reviewing them and saying, I guess that's my question, is you're wanting her opinion, and I guess she does review them, so that's all.
We can try to answer that question. Mayor Denny.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I can tell you that I review every council meeting agenda with the directors and with the city attorney prior to the meetings, so that I know we try to anticipate potential problem areas. I don't recall specific, they're not meant for discussion, they're not meant for back and forth banter. So if that did happen, that shouldn't have happened, and I would agree with you there. It's more of and again, I mentioned, I discovered other cities doing it. Like I mentioned, several of them: Green Bay, Sheboygan, Stevens Point. Go take a look at them. They're doing it very similarly. I've printed out the agendas, and they don't have backup in the packet. It's a standing item. But I will speak with the city attorney, and if it's, and like I mentioned, if it's policy, if it's discussion type material that doesn't belong in that spot, we won't put it there. But it's, and I've talked to the other mayors. In fact, I've had lengthy discussions with Mayor Gingrich, I'm forgetting his name now, it's Larson, I think, from Sheboygan. So, these things are fairly benign, and it's not a policy discussion. If it was, then we would bring it out to a different format. And I'll work to refine that, but this is new because of some of the things that were happening. I felt it was necessary to use that spot to bring some decorum. Yes. Yes.
Mayor Denny, then what would be why are you so opposed to being more clear on what you're going to discuss? I guess I don't understand the reticence to say, okay, I will, outline something generally that I want to discuss or make a statement on.
Well, we have standing appointments, we have public comment, we don't know what the public is going to come to speak about. I'm going off of, in part, what precedents other cities do. It's something that the mayor adds a little bit to the front of the meeting. I'll have to think about that. I don't believe that it's a week in advance. I'm going to think of a quip that I'm going to put out there. For example, the newsletter came out, I think that day or the day before. So that was the first time that I was able to use Tiffany Rodriguez-Lee's work, and it fit, I felt, with what we had work to do. Somebody had mentioned in public comment, so it hit me in the moment, and I read the poem. It wasn't something I planned in advance of 6 days, but I'll definitely work with the city attorney and work through that.
But items coming before the city council have to be clearly identified. They have to be clearly identified so that the public viewing that agenda knows exactly what all the people are going to be saying, and the mayor, and any other presentation. So they have to be clearly identified so that there's no doubt at all with regard to what's going to be said.
So then, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Since this is the Rules Committee. The agenda was published roughly 3 days in advance of this. Typically, standing committees rarely meet the 6-day rule. The 6-day rule and the rules in general are things that I have set out to try to enforce and to fix. The clerk has been doing a great job getting the agendas out on time. So this is part of the process. Let's work through and let's get it right. If we're going to, if the concern is public notice, then let's practice that, and let's practice it throughout everything we do.
Right. I believe this was properly noticed. I don't have a sense of that it was not. Yes, Alderperson Lukens.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I agree with Alders Martins and McElhaney regarding the open meetings laws. I thought the same with that we have a poet laureate. I was thinking that too. So, I think that there are lots of reasons to have things agendized and to have that be specific. I'm also hoping, and this relates with decorum, but I think I appreciated Alder Tierney's comment about, we should have decorum among members as well. And so I think that should also apply to, there have been numerous times now during this comment time by the mayor where comments have been made toward alders, like the Game of Thrones and things like that, that I think decorum means that's not going to happen by anyone. And so one more reason I think that if we have things agendized and that it's noticed, because that is following open meetings laws, or to get the parliamentarians' view on it, I would appreciate that.
Thank you. Right now, the Rules Committee, we had the one motion earlier with regard to number 6. I think the staff as well, and we will work to tighten that rule up a little bit so that I think we can make that a little firmer rule. The next item on the agenda, but of course, this is the Rules Committee, so if you have other issues with regard to the rules of the City Council, I think this is where we can make adjustments and rework. I think that this is a fine time that we can be doing that, and I think we'll be looking for suggestions for that. I think I envision that we would have another meeting of the Rules Committee sometime in April, I would think. Try to finagle it through some open evening in April after staff and the city attorney, we can finalize some of these wordings and bring that back to you. And then, of course, if you have other issues with regard to specific issues of the rules that you would like us to take a look at, or additions to the rule, we can certainly be open to agendizing that item for future discussion. Yes, Mike?
Yep, are we on item 6 now, or are we still on 5?
I would think we can move to item 6, yes.
Yeah, because I guess, when you gave your recap there, I just didn't want it to get lost in the discussion, but I'd like to see the development of some kind of a statement that could be given prior to public comment on how public comment.
Right, I think that will be coming back for sure.
Okay, thank you.
So is there, we'll try to arrange a Rules Committee sometime in April. Would that be agreeable? Not quite sure when as yet, but we will try to put that together. Any items specifically now that you would like us to put on the agenda for the next meeting of the Rules Committee? We had a good discussion this evening. Thank you very much. I think we have some, yes, we have, yes.
Would you like to bring back the, we also talked about restricting signs. You wanted an opinion from Ann on the ability to restrict signage in here, as well as an opinion from her, or the parliamentarian, on the dangers of violating open meetings law due to generic agenda language. Do you want those agendas as well? Okay.
I think with the issue with regard to signs is in the realm of the freedom of speech, but I'm not sure where exactly that lies, so we'll have to investigate that. Hearing nothing further to come before this Rules Committee, a motion to adjourn would be in order. There is a motion, there is a second. All in favor of said motion, say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Who made the second? Gosh, Terry Killian. I don't know why I kept having problems with that.